Welcome into the Freshman Podcast. I'm EJ Manuel.
I'm Dr. Myron Roll, and we are back for another episode of the Freshman Podcast where we give fresh takes, fresh ideas on the topics that matter to you. And one topic that is super exciting for me, EJ, and it is for you too, because I've known you for a long time, and this matters to you, and you have stressed the importance of it, is education. Yeah. And we think about education from a sort of global perspective, where it's always good to learn more. It's always good to be a forever student. But I kind of want to start off this conversation with you today about education in our early life, primary school, middle school, what you're doing for your kids, what you think the next generation should be thinking about when it comes to education, because your foundation of who you are now, the success that you've had now, it stems a lot off of the base that you built from when you were younger. So how do you speak to that? How do you think about that?
Well, I'm glad we are going to hit on education because I think in today's age, education really is in question. And what I mean by that is I think with the height of digital creation, the height of AI, the height of ChatGPT, these kinds of things out there, I think the natural old school thought of education has really been lost. And for me, the reason why I love education, why I respect education, and why I know it's important is because you got to have a framework in knowledge, whether it's history, whether it's in communication, whether it's in desiring to learn a trade, to be, an engineer, to be a surgeon, to be a dentist, to be a hairstylist, to be a football player, to be an athlete, a pro athlete. Sure. You got to be smart, man.
Sure.
And you have to be able to not only retain information, but you also be able to understand information. And I think that comes from having a basis in education. And from, the infancy stages, going to like preschool or even just the small things that you do at home as a child, I think is very important to pay attention to. Because again, we have young kids. We talk about them a lot here on this podcast. But even with our daughter, who's 2 now, thank goodness for our nanny and, my wife and I, we try to do a good job of this, of, reading to her every day. So instead of the iPad with videos, which some of that content's really, really good. Everybody loves Miss Rachel. Shout out to Miss Rachel because she's been a savior at moments. But in all seriousness, books still matter. To actually sit down and read, or to look at pictures, or to read a newspaper, or to open up a magazine and maybe read a story about your favorite author or your favorite athlete, or your favorite movie star. I think is really important because we get so caught up in the visual and the medium of just watching movies and watching podcast. You know what I mean? Like it's really kind of warped our thought in education. And I know you can speak to it even further because you had to use education to really become in order to be a surgeon, you have to be a master. You know what I mean? Like you have to truly master what it is that you do on a daily basis. So why is education so important to you?
Well, those foundational blocks are critical. I mean, knowing how to think through complex problems, process information, reading, like you're saying, is super critical. Reasoning, comprehension of what you're seeing, and then sort of putting that into your mind, and then allowing that to activate some action. Not just sort of, you've done this before and I've done this, or you read something, you're like, man, I don't know what I just read for the last like 2 chapters, right? I'm like, what is this?
No doubt. That's so true.
100%. So
well, hold on, stay there though, because that's a good point. Because I find myself even now, like if I'm reading something, you kind of get lost in the translation of just whatever the content is that you're reading. How do you kind of slow it down? And because I think for you as a surgeon, and again, I'm talking about reading and having education to learn a trade, right? Or to learn a profession or a master at something. How do you compartmentalize whatever you're reading to actually be able to retain the information that you're reading? Yeah,
well, I know myself very well. And so I don't go 30 minutes or 45 minutes of reading something straight and say, okay, I'm just going to do this and that's it.
Okay.
That's atypical for me, and that doesn't work for me. So I might read something for 15, 20 minutes, digest it, take a second, maybe answer some questions that come with it, or think about it in my mind, okay, I just read about taking, this particular vein to access this tumor that's supracerebellar but transtentorial. Okay, got it. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm thinking about it, and that was a lot, eh? Did I give you something?
I can't retain that one.
Come on, baby.
I like that. That's good, man.
But I'm thinking about it, and I read it, I think about it, put it in my mind, I answer some questions on it, and then I go back to continuing to read. And I think that breaking up of the monotony is helpful for me.
Yeah.
And because I know how I study, I know how I think best through things. But getting back to the sort of the foundational principles, I think now with young children, we have, as you know, 4 kids, 2 sets of twins. Reading to them every day is important. Having some of the basic pillars of knowledge are critical. So math, right? Knowing how to add, subtract, divide, knowing your times table, these sorts of things. Knowing how to write, right? Knowing how to put a sentence together, noun, verb, subject, adjective, knowing what that means. I think that's kind of a lost art, especially as you mentioned, with a digital age, people can do something in 140 characters.
Can't say nothing.
Lowercase, no punctuation.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Do you speak like
no
this
commas,
too?
no
commas,
apostrophes,
nothing.
none of that.
I mean,
Yeah.
it looks terrible,
true.
right?
Yep.
So you need to have that level of writing, being able to elucidate your thoughts clearly on paper through prose. And then something else that is, you said communication, and I want to stay on that because I think that is sort of a underappreciated part of early education for kids. The ability to be able to present and speak and elucidate yourself and have these, oratory skills that command rooms or that get your point across. Because it's not going to leave you, right? If you have to stand in front of your family and speak about something, if you have to stand in front of millions of people watching you on ESPN, you have to be able to sound clear and concise and coherent. If I'm standing in front of a patient and a patient's family and describing to them, this is the kind of surgery I want to do, here are the risks and benefits. If I'm stumbling, fumbling through my words, if I'm looking down, don't look confident, they're like, I don't want this guy operating on me, So all of it goes back to early childhood. The question I want to sort of pose and challenge to you, E, is I talk about these pillars of education that we have. There have been a lot of discussion in society. I kind of like to bring society into things. Been a lot of discussion on society about what not to teach our kids early. What are things that are influencing them in a way that some people, whether it's politically motivated or not, think that it is distracting to who they are, whether it be their culture, whether it be bringing faith into sort of formalized education, whether it be bringing gender identity into formalized education. It's a bit of a controversial topic, but I kind of want to see how you thought about it, especially as a father and a parent to young kids who are going to be going through a U.S. school system.
Sure. Well, I think for a parent, when you're teaching your kids and when you're focusing on how you want your kid to have their upbringing be with education, is really, focused on what's important to you, and maybe trying to forecast, for your child. Because what I think is really important about education is not so much just like books and studying in class, is also traveling and experiences. I mean, that's educational too. When you actually go off, and again, you're from Bahamas, like when you are someone who is cultured and, granted you have to have the luxury to be able to travel and go different places, but I think that stuff is invaluable, man, because, the more that I've traveled is more eye-opening to me on life. You realize that there's different ways to do a lot of different things. The old adage is, multiple ways to skin a cat. And I think when you actually travel, you end up learning more from just people, which would then help your education.
Is that a country saying from Virginia, Tidewater?
Probably, yeah. I don't know. I might have heard it on
y'all
TV
got a little
too.
country in there.
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all consider yourself north or south? What part of the war were y'all on? I'm trying to
it
figure
depends
out.
where you are in Virginia.
Okay.
So in the 7-5, I think we probably consider ourselves East Coast. I don't think we consider ourselves country south.
Okay.
But we certainly don't consider ourselves New York either. You know what I mean? I would
gotcha.
just say East Coast.
Okay,
So a good
gotcha.
mix of.
I got my
both.
bad. Go ahead,
You're
man.
good.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
it just depends where you are in the 7-5. But I say all that to say, man, education is multifaceted, and I would even mention something that's really important to me. Kind of going back to what you asked me, is multiple languages.
Yes.
I live in a household where we speak English in there. My wife speaks German. My stepson also speaks German. Our nanny speaks Spanish. So our baby, Sakima, she knows Spanish, she knows English, and she knows German. And she'll answer you in all three. She's 2 years old.
Wow.
And so I'm thinking, how much of an advantage is that's going to be for her and also her young brother, who's a baby, for when they get older in life. Because, again, it opens up different doors. You don't just necessarily have to apply for a job in the United States. Now you can apply for one in Europe. Now you can apply for one in South America. Now you can certainly blend in well down here in Miami. You know what I mean? Being able to speak Spanish and get around. So that's why I think with our infrastructure within our American education, again, basing this off of having a wife that's from Europe, there's a lot of different things that they do over in Europe or other countries that maybe we don't do here. And for good or, bad reasons, I don't know. I'm not a politician per se to speak on, Board of Education and things like that. But I do know something that I value in my family is being able to be, one, open-minded with your education, And then two, speaking multiple languages, I think is huge. It's something I wish I could do. Can't do it yet, but
You know, what's
hopefully
so
one day.
amazing is that your answer to that question and your thoughts through that question was very similar to how I thought about that question before I even asked it. Because I think a lot of times in a U.S.-based education system, especially primary and middle school, parents deposit their children into these schools and say, okay, now you be the teacher, the babysitter, and the parent for
Right.
8,
That's really
9
what it
hours.
is, babysitting.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
Like you
That's
go
really what it
and
is.
do all that and do all that for them, right? And then so you sort of put a lot of education and a lot of importance and emphasis on that 8, 9 hours that they get in school, and then when they come home, it's okay, that's it.
Right.
I do think that schools are responsible for, as we mentioned, mathematics, arithmetic, science, history, sentence forming, structure, those sort of like pillar, essential, rudimentary aspects of education. But then the other aspects that speak to culture, speak to language, speak to personal identity, speak to who your family is and the history of your family.
Yeah.
Don't rely on a school to teach you that, the Bahamas was a British Commonwealth and there were slaves in the Bahamas and the slaves all took the last name of Lord John Roll and that's why the Roll name was big in Exuma. I'm not going to learn that in my school system in America. I'm going to learn that from my parents, learn that from the community centers that I'm a part of, learn that from church, learn that from my family members. I'm going to get infused with education from all aspects. And it sounds like what you're saying was exactly what you did say, is there are other sort of elements of education that stretch beyond the classroom that I think we should focus on and put more emphasis on that aspect than the divisive conversation we're having now where, oh, you can't teach critical race theory or you can't teach gender identity. Yep. Well, look, that's not as important right now, in my opinion, for schools to sort of put that on to people. And if a family and a culture and identity and a community feels that's important, then there are other ways to educate your children so that they can grow up, know who they are, love who they are, be who they are, feel comfortable who they are, and then use that mind, that great brain that they have to go on and have success.
As a doctor, what would you emphasize in education for a young person? If it's a, 8th grader, someone that's transitioning into high school. Because once you get to high school, you're still taking, general art classes and all those kinds of things, English, math, PE, fun stuff like that. Yeah. But how would you emphasize education for a young person moving up right now?
I would say the Socratic method of questioning, being curious, being inquisitive, finding answers upon answers, having this sort of investigative eye in your mind to say, is this right? Does this sound right? Well, let me see if this is right. Let me fact check this, or let me see what else could be right, right? Just not taking an answer as black and white. Oh, well, this must be it.
And
you said it, this must be it. There could be 4 answers to this because when you get into medicine, no question, you have somebody who comes in with seizures. Are they having a seizure because they have a metabolic disarray? Their glucose or their sodium's out of control? Are they having a seizure because they have a brain tumor? Are they having a seizure because they're dehydrated? Are they having a seizure because they're not sleeping well? I mean, there's all different things in the differential diagnosis that you kind of have to put your mind to. So I think having that questioning mindset, that curiosity expands your mind, broadens it to a way where you're able to think through complex problems and look at things from multiple angles. I'd encourage young people, especially your son, who's going into medicine, to think about questions and topics now with a broader mind and ask many questions.
Okay, my follow-up to that though would be, where's the line drawn between a young person that's learning that can ask these questions but still needs to listen too, right? Because if somebody's ultra curious, sometimes it just continues to be questions and questions and questions. There still has to be a finite answer to some of these questions too. Does that make sense? Like, where do you kind of draw that line in your curiosity from actually learning and retaining something that is a fact, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a judgment call, and it really, I think, depends on the person who is sort of help facilitating that question environment. You can take these questions from a young person who just wants to know, who wants to soak up knowledge. It's important to them to do it, but then at some point, if you have to move the lesson along or you want them to sort of stick on a point, then you have to sort of gauge, okay, how much are we getting from this moment? And how much are we just spinning our wheels in a circle and not really moving forward? Right. And so as physicians now, we think about topics and complex cases with a mindset of what else could it be? What am I missing? How am I going to treat this person holistically and give them the best comprehensive care by asking the important and pivotal questions to get to what can cure them and what can get them out of the hospital, get them back to their family, reintegrated with community.
Yeah. How do you think we debunk the thought around education in the black community, black and brown community? Because a lot of times, especially in certain neighborhoods or certain parts of the country, it does seem like minority education is not as good, as afforded, as other parts of the country that is different. They have better schools, they have better books, they have better opportunities, more computers, all those kinds of things. Because we even saw the discrepancy when we had COVID. Some school systems or some areas that were in black and brown neighborhoods, they didn't even have Wi-Fi to where kids could stay home and still take classes and things like that. So how do you think you debunked, the fact or the thought around education not being cool, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or not being important to a certain subset or a culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. COVID was bad in many ways, but it was good in the ways that it highlighted some of the deficiencies that we have in our American system. I'll start with even healthcare, right? It sort of highlighted the fact that people who had comorbidities and chronic conditions, who had to pay for medications or couldn't get to their primary care physician or did not have a primary care physician, were showing up at hospitals because these are the people who are getting sick mostly, right? The people who could take their medications, were compliant with their medications, visited their general practitioner often, they were relatively safe. And so it sort of highlighted this sort of health disparity that you see black and brown, poor communities, and the rest.
Which goes hand in hand with education.
Hand in hand with education. Yeah. The same sort of disparities were highlighted, just like you mentioned. And so I think it's a fractured educational system in America where you have the Department of Education from a federal standpoint, then you have a state, then you have a county, then you have a local municipality. Right. There's all these different hands in the cookie jar, and it's like this one's saying do this one's saying do that, this one's saying do this one's saying do that. I also don't think that so the system is a little bit sort of disjointed and disorganized.
Right.
I also don't think that we are emphasizing the value of teachers, the value of how important they are, how much they matter.
That's good, man.
And you value them by paying them, right? You value them by saying you don't have to come out your pocket to pay for school supplies to take care of your classroom. Because your budget doesn't allow you to do that. Or we have budget cuts because there's something else happening in town, but for your school and your classroom, it's not that important. And so emphasizing teachers, making that profession as lucrative or as exciting, as enticing as some of our other careers that we sort of systematically think about, I think that's important. You attract better teachers, you attract so these better teachers will demand better books, better technology, better facilities, better programs, better experiences, connectivity to local colleges or museums or travel, like you were saying, and these sort of experiences. These will sort of, I think, heighten and enlighten our group. When you think about who is going to be the next generation of leaders, there are a lot of groups that look at third grade reading levels to see how well these third graders are doing.
Pecking order.
Exactly. Wow. And so if the third graders are reading poorly, then you can kind of predict that they're not going to be great workers in 15, 20 years or whatever the case may be when they're adults. And your economy may suffer, or you may not have a strong enough workforce to take care of the things, the industries that you want to run. So there's a lot to education and a lot to hold on to it. And it's important that we continue to focus and emphasize it.
Being in rooms that you've been in as a Rhodes Scholar, a master's or a doctorate at Harvard, obviously a physician now and one of the best physicians in the country.
Shout out.
World.
Appreciate that, baby.
Absolutely, man.
Come on now.
Dr. Rowe right here. But what have you noticed? Because again, you've studied with people that are from different countries. So, I went to school here in America, so all my classes, most of the kids were from America. So we all kind of had the same rearing from first grade, second grade, third grade. You know what I mean? Like the basis was pretty much all the same. But is there anything that you've noticed that's good or bad, maybe from some of the experiences or some of the times or some of the associations that you've had as a Rhodes Scholar when you were studying abroad?
I think the exposure to varying cultures abroad, for some of my classmates who studied in Australia, studied in Egypt, studied in Lusaka, Zambia, they had more of a diverse educational setup, as you mentioned, with languages, with a clash or a connectivity to culture that's different than theirs, even faith that might have been different than theirs. It didn't seem so cookie cutter and so sort of regimented in a structured setup. It seemed it had a more fluidity and it had a little bit more touch to the world around us. And it also had a perspective of America that was different than America has of itself.
I've noticed
You
that.
know, and so like, and I'm going to
noticed
ask you this question about your wife because she comes from another country, and so I'm sure she's had different experience. So you have something to speak about this. But I remember going home or going back to the Bahamas in the summertime and talked to my cousins and asked them how they felt or thought about Cuba, for instance. Growing up in the United States of America like I did, you hear about Cuba, you hear about Russia. These are groups that are sort of supposed to be negative. They're communist. They're different. They have different governments that we don't really respect, or whatever the case may be. You're sort of indoctrinated with that from an American myopia.
Yeah.
When I talk to my family in the Bahamas, they say, "Oh man, we go to Cuba all the time for healthcare. We have a good relationship with Cuba. It's a whole different approach,
Completely different perspective.
whole different perspective."
Yeah.
And so I think it was so
true.
rewarding and refreshing, in my opinion, to have the flexibility of mind to think about people, to think about areas, think about topics with the level the level of breadth and flexibility that sort of allows you to appreciate the differences in cultures and people, but then allows you to know it as well. And so for you, as you said, you know, your wife coming from another country, helping raise your children together here in America, sort of maybe fighting the system of the U.S. system versus how she was raised and what she expects of your children. You know, how do you balance that at home?
It's a great thought, and that's why I said that a few seconds ago, because when you really travel or when you get around people that are from different backgrounds, different cultures, because even faith kind of goes into education as well. It's really interesting how they kind of intermingle, okay? Because they would be kind of different thoughts, but they're somewhat the same because it's really just a school of thought and what you believe in too.
Right.
But in our household, man, you know, my wife, again, being from Europe, the way that she went to school, or she went to a boarding school in Zurich or in Switzerland, you know what I mean? So like the way that she was a young child learning different things, I feel like in Europe they don't just learn like, you know, math and science, and they learn like actual applicable things in life too. You know what I mean? Like
I like that.
How to prepare a meal, how to set a table,
Right.
etiquette, how to dress for an interview. Like these are things that they learn in like young school, or even like at the kindergarten level. Like kindergarten starts at like 3rd grade for the kids in Europe, not 5 or 6. Not saying that's good or bad, but it's just different. And I think that's something that I've noticed, you know, from my wife. Is like, okay, the thought process and even some of the things that she's experienced with, that I'm not experienced with at all, it does root from maybe sometimes her education and things that I probably learned that maybe she didn't learn. It's just different. Ultimately, that's why I said it really matters on what's important for you as, you know, as the fathers or as, you know, the adults in the household for kids, is because I don't just look at school as something, because school is not just about, like I said, math or science. It's also teaching you social skills too.
Yes.
You know, it's also teaching you to have some heartache when you like a girl in class and she don't like you, she likes somebody else.
Yeah.
It also teaches you, you know, how to win and lose when you go to PE and physical education and those kinds of things. But it also can teach you how to build a computer. It can also teach you how to put together Wi-Fi systems and all these different things that you need now in today's age. So I just think it's important to have a focus on education and not just look at it as something that, oh, I'm just going to school to go through the motions, or I'm just going to school to, you know, kind of punch the clock per se. I think you can really get something out of it that can open up your world, because again, that's why it's so important to travel. When you travel, you start to learn different languages. You start to taste different foods, which I think is a part of education. You start to eat healthier. You start to look at some of the foods that we're offered here in America that in other countries, they'd be like, what, y'all eat that? You know what I mean? Like, and again, not hating on our society, but let's be honest, is all the food that's for us, that's kind of sold to the masses, the healthiest? Bro. You know this as a doctor. Like, there's stuff that they feed us that's probably legit killing us, causing cancers, diseases, all kind of things.
100%. I remember when I was studying at Oxford in the UK, and I would go to Tesco or Sainsbury's, and I would grab some like peanut butter and jelly, because that's all I can eat.
That was like a protein snack.
That was me, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm getting peanut butter and jelly, get some bread.
You already know. Wheat bread or white bread? Which one was you?
I was going white. I was going white.
Okay,
bread. I was going white bread.
I
know you're a wheat bread guy. I was white bread. But I would go there and I would get the peanut butter and jelly and the bread, and then I said, okay, you know, I got 2 weeks. I got 2 weeks to eat this. You know, I'm gonna be straight. Man, in 4 days, I open up the jam or the jelly. mold, not good anymore. The peanut butter, same thing. I'm like, I gotta eat this stuff right away. Like,
Right.
oh, there's no preservatives in it. There's none of the stuff that we would put in it. So,
And again, just to be clear, so in Europe there are no preservatives, whereas here you put a jar of jelly in that joint, it might last you 2 or 3 years.
Yes, sir.
That's not normal. You know
not
what I
normal,
mean?
brother.
But again, if you grow up here, you don't know any different.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's funny you say that, because even the way that we eat now in our house, I think
processed foods, baby.
No processed foods. Like,
processed
we don't give our
foods.
kids no processed
I
foods.
appreciate that.
And it sounds bougie when you say it to
It
people,
does. It
but
does.
you actually look up and you're like, man, I'm actually saving money by going to the grocery store and taking the food home and actually preparing it and cooking it and then feeding it to our kids versus going to McDonald's or going to Burger King. Again, no hatred toward those companies. If y'all want to sponsor us, it's all good.
Shout out, baby.
But it's not the best thing for us as adults,
Yeah.
especially as athletes too. I mean, I think as as we got older and got into college and go to the training table, like I even remember we had honey fried chicken Fridays, right?
Yes.
Bomb.
And
fire.
everybody looked forward to it.
Everybody look forward to it.
No question.
But honestly, was that going to help fuel you on a Saturday afternoon
Absolutely
when it's
not.
89 degrees and it's third quarter? Nah.
Yeah.
And so I can remember when there was a coaching change, that was changed. Like we didn't miss it. And we might have had it once a month versus once every week or twice every week. And again, fair or unfair, I just think, promoting yourself to education, being open to new ideas. Because would you agree, like education is not just books, but it's like an ideation too. Like it's ideas. Like it's a matter of, exploring thought and kind of going back to what you said with curiosity. Like how would you kind of layer education in a sense of being beyond just school?
Yeah, I think it's the whole body. It's the whole body being imprinted with experiences. You certainly need those fundamental things. I keep going back to that. You've got to have it.
Of course.
But outside of that, there's those sort of imprinting on your corporal material body of experiences, of factoids, of life lessons that really help move you forward. And sometimes you use them and you're not even sure where you got it from.
Right.
Oh man, I am really good at organizing myself. I'm really good at planning. I'm really good at coalescing data. I'm really good at communicating and putting people together in the same room to work on a group project together. Where did I get that from? Oh, well, I had some community events that I was able to be a part of when I was younger outside of school, and I saw it. I saw my mentors doing it. Boom. Next thing you know, it imprinted on my body, and this is a part of my career going forward. So I think it has to be looked at just beyond the neck up, just the cerebrum, just the cerebral aspect of knowledge and intellectual capital, and more so as a whole body experience that makes us well-rounded. Because I think that's when you have really strong leaders and really impactful people, when they have a well-rounded
So
sort
good.
of vast perspective of life and of people,
Yep.
love their neighbor, love the world around them, and try to do everything they can to serve it and make it better. Something I did want to sort of push on you as far as education, because it is a topic that has sort of spanned decades, actually, is this conversation around where we should push our young people in the forms of education. Should we have our talented 10th go to higher education, get advanced degrees, PhDs, MDs, law degrees, and have them lead and galvanize the masses, develop industry, run governments, run countries, and then everybody comes together with that? Or should we sort of
top
focus
10%, you're saying.
top 10%, like W.B. Du Bois said, right? He talked about the talented 10th. He was talking about this in the context of civil rights, but for you, I just want to extract the education aspect of it. Invest in your best. Top 10%, this is your best, let's do it.
Right.
Or should it be sort of what Booker T. Washington was saying, his counterpart, who cut his teeth down in Tuskegee and was a former slave and said, look, economic independence is important. Let's get a trade. Let's get a job. Be a bricklayer. Be a construction worker. Be a plumber. Have some money. Get your trade. Get your tool.
Create your own.
Create your own.
Yeah,
De-emphasize higher education
Correct.
and just have your own. Where do you stand on that?
All right, so this is a great question, and something that you and I have talked about internally. You sent me videos on. I appreciate that, because again, it was very enlightening. Seriously, because W.E.B. Du Bois's thought was more that talented 10th, trying to prepare the best and help them rear up and kind of lead the generation. Whereas Booker T. Washington, to me, the way I kind of understood his thought process was, centralized in like one thing. Like learn a trade is kind of how it seemed to me. Like if you're a bricklayer, be the best bricklayer that you can be. If you're a teacher, be the best teacher that you can be. Yeah. But don't necessarily try to be that super high end, maybe the president. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just have like a job, really. The way I think is the best, maybe a mixture of both.
No.
But I'm not going to split the fence.
I need you to go. I need you to go. One or the other.
I would say Booker T. Washington's thoughts probably make the most sense to me in today's age.
Yeah.
One, because my parents graduated from Booker T. Washington High School in Norfolk, Virginia.
Shout out.
Some of my grandmas. And also, he went to HU, which is Hampton University, the real HU out there. No offense, Howard. My mom went to Howard, too. But I think
your mom was in higher education for a long time.
Absolutely, exactly.
Old Dominion,
working
right?
at ODU, Old Dominion in Norfolk, Virginia. And so I think the philosophy behind Booker T. Washington makes the most sense to me because you always have a job. If you go into school, you get your education, and then some people may not be a professional athlete. Some people may not be a lawyer. Some people may not be a neurosurgeon. Some people may not be a dentist. These, white collar, high level executive positions. Mm-hmm. Some people will just be a delivery postman. Some people will be, a trash collector.
Which is fine.
Yes. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean?
It.
And you can still have a good life. Granted, it's tough now because of where we are with our economy and politics and those things. Yeah. But at least you have a job. You're able to put a roof over your head. You're able to put some food on the table for yourself and for your family. And so, again, kind of sourcing W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, back then, those thoughts were different because you had civil rights. This was before, you still had Jim Crow laws. You still had a lot of, things that Black and brown people straight up just couldn't vote. Like, these kinds of things, had women's suffrage and all these types of disparities in the world back then. But I feel like Booker T. Washington has made the most sense to me because if you can specialize in one thing and have your own too, because I think he was also trying to teach the Black population back then to build their own wealth, build their own banks, build their own restaurants and their own educational Tuskegee Institute or FAMU, like these historically Black universities, to have their own and not necessarily assimilate to the Harvards or the Yales of the world that we weren't necessarily always accepted to.
What's so interesting is that you and I have higher education degrees, and we think the same way on this. Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with Booker T. Washington, his school of thought. I think there's value and merit in W.B. Du Bois for sure, given the fact that both of us went and got college degrees and both are using our education, and we love our kids to do that too.
And honestly, we would be in that 10th as well, though.
We would be in the 10th.
We would be in that 10th that probably could do the higher learning. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think it's strong to have that economic independence, to have the ability to say, this is mine, this is what I mastered, this is my skill. I love trade schools. Mm-hmm. There's Florida Technical College right in Orlando, Florida, where we live. I'm a huge advocate for people to find a trade, do something well, be the best you can be at it, embrace it, own it, master it, and provide that service for people who need you. I mean, there's small businesses that can grow from that. Entrepreneurship can grow from that. Self-worth grows from that. It can be a family lineage. You can keep that plumbing business in your family and just pass it down. Landscaping, keep it onto your family and say, this is ours. This is our corner of the economy. This is our corner of education. And so I truly believe in it. Yes, it's great. There's a place for those high intellectual individuals who will find out how you split an atom and how you, sort of
reprogramming AI, bots and stuff.
Exactly. You will find some phenomenal pharmaceutical that cures this certain kind of cancer that's been told to be incurable. You will find those people. They will be outliers. They'll be there. Sure. But for the majority of people, especially like you said, in today's world, who are struggling, who are having challenges, find that trade. You don't need to go through the traditional path of going to college, getting in debt, and then trying to get a master's degree, getting in more debt, and then having trouble finding a home, moving to a place, finding a job. Starting from behind, 100%. Speaking of HBCUs, my wife went to Tennessee State, so I got to shout out TSU all day.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, no, I think I think Booker T. Washington's approach was one that I would sort of aspire to, and one I think makes sense definitely in today's world.
Yeah, I would say for our listeners too, just kind of digging in on that conversation between Booker T. Washington's thought process and W.E.B. Du Bois, look it up on YouTube because it's really, really interesting and actually, I think it also lends to where our education is today as well, because our history always does repeat itself. And so I think that's really important. But I was going to ask you this, kind of going back to that thought of having a trade or going along with the thought process of Booker T. Washington. Do you think it's still important for education now? Because where we are with technology advances, entrepreneurship at young ages. Like it's kids, bro, like that's 17 years old that have full-on companies that are able to go out and mine Bitcoin, that are able to go out on the trading thing and do these trades and stuff and making real money. And so if I'm 17, 16 years old and I already understand the knowledge, because again, these kids are not computer nerds, but they nerds. You know what I'm saying? Like they are super savvy with a computer. And there's a lot, it's almost endless. The opportunity that comes from a computer now is almost endless. And so do you think it's still important, for an 18-year-old high school senior that's just graduating to even go to college? Do you think that's important?
I don't think it's as important now. And I say that because I feel that the rigid structure of that pathway of going to college, getting in debt, going to another college, getting some master's degree or a PhD or whatever the case may be, trying to find a job, that has become less significant for a space of capitalism in America where money can be made and lives could be settled and sorted and opportunities could exist based on the type of interest that you may have and how AI opens things for people, the computers open things for people, other sort of entrepreneurial, capitalistic kind of experiences open things for people, unlike it did before. I think the American educational system was made at a time when there was sort of like a formulaic pathway to taking care of your family and earning a solvent income that could help you, whether it be a teacher, lawyer, police officer, business owner, doctor, whatever the case may be. These were a couple of the professions that we knew if you did this, then you would get this. Sure. And this is the way to get there. Now it's so open. Yeah. It's wide open. And so that means teachers and educational systems and organizations and boards that control what are taught, what curriculum's taught in school need to have a little bit more flexibility, be less rigid, and allow for this creativity in the young people to really express itself.
That's really interesting too, especially coming from you as someone who did go through the higher learning to become a neurosurgeon. So you're basically saying that college is not as important as it once was.
Not as it once was, man. I mean, if you want to take out brain tumors in kids, yes.
Sure, you have to go through.
You have to go through this process.
Right.
People expect you to be fully trained and well knowledged and well equipped and prepared to be in those trenches to help save this life.
Yeah.
And so that's not going to go anywhere. That can't change. But not everyone wants to do 7 years of residency, 4 years of medical school.
And be in debt when you finish.
And be in debt or just go through that time of some valuable moments. I mean, I'm 37 right now. I mean, that's 7 years I spent doing neurosurgical residency at Harvard. Loved it. It went by quick, but that's almost a decade of training to do something that not a lot of people can do that will have some reward on the end of it. Let's go, man. My wife stays at the Four Seasons all the time. That's where she wants to stay.
I understand. You got to tell me.
Support it, baby.
I know what time it is, Dr. Roll. I know what time it is. But it's interesting that you say that too, because I agree with you. I think although it is good to go to college, I think it's a great experience because it still teaches you and prepares you for like real life. Yeah. Outside of like high school where you're still living with mom and dad or grandma, whoever's at home. Because now, entrepreneurship is beyond just owning your own business or a real estate company or owning a podcast studio like our friend Andrew here. Like it's now you have OnlyFans. Just calling it what it is. Some of those people, men and women, now it ain't just the ladies that's making money on this thing. They making real money too. Yeah. I mean, 5-6 figures a month kind of subscriptions. And granted, some of it is more of like the sex end or like that kind of being more sold out there. But there's a lot of different layers to it. And I don't think, again, I want to say this, the right way. Like, I don't think that's necessarily frowned upon. At the end of the day, it's entrepreneurship. Right. If that's something that somebody wants to do and chooses to do, that's their life. You know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to get at. Do I agree with all of it? Not necessarily. But I'm not going to knock someone that is actually hustling. And if they see an opportunity to make a monetary achievement, hey, I say go for it. It's there now.
You said something that I thought was super critical. It's school is not only the academic benefits that come from it, but also the social experiences that come from it, where that may be a sacrifice for these young people who are going into gaming or going into AI and just sitting behind a computer and working through codes and algorithms where they may not have that same sort of experience of how do I talk to a person who looks differently than me? Sure. How do I have a conversation and hold it? How do I know when to give a 30-second elevator pitch to somebody quickly, get my thoughts out clearly, and then keep it moving? How do I look someone in the eye, shake someone's hand, and say, "Hi, this is who I am.
Yeah.
I wanted to meet you," and all these things like that.
That's good.
It's difficult
Yeah.
in some of these aspects. So there is a bit of a sacrifice, obviously, with that sort of thing. I think in high school, college, even primary school, navigating the social waters, you had the jocks who would sit here, the theater people who would sit here, the girly girls who were wearing, Baby Farm or whatever it was. I don't know what
Baby
it was.
Fat, Fat Farm.
Fat Farm, Baby Fat. I put it together, baby. I don't know what it is, man. But, Juicy
My
Couture.
dog said Baby Farm.
Bro, that's how
Dr. Roll.
I was out of touch, baby.
You good, fam? You good.
But
you knew what it was, though.
I knew what
Apple
it was.
bottoms, all that.
And
Yes,
some
sir.
baby
Jersey
on it.
dresses.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No doubt. But
Yeah, but for real, like those are not just the fashion part, but like that's even another lane. You know what I'm saying? Like learning fashion, learning angles, learning how to cut fabrics. And, I've been around all those people. That's why I really have enjoyed, like the last 15 years of my life, really once I left college. Obviously a lot of it, the bulk of it was football and my profession there, but also just being around other people, man. I've been around clothing designers. I've been around, IT people. I've been around people who are venture capitalists. I've been around, people that are in politics and kind of seeing their transition from being an athlete to now being a city councilman or being a mayor. I know that's something that you aspire as well, and watching your transition as you continue throughout your profession as a neurosurgeon. So I don't know, man. At the end of the bulk of it is education is something that is so multifaceted. And I think the biggest thing is, man, just keep your eyes open and really just keep living.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if somebody offers you an opportunity to take a trip somewhere that's different from where you live at, take it. You know what I mean? Like if somebody says, hey man, let's go on this trip to, I don't know, to Guatemala. You know what I mean? Or you get like a chance to go do like a mission trip at a church or something like that. I think it's important to do those things because it opens up your eyes and your lens of your expectation for your own life. And it kind of shows you a different way of how to do multiple things.
So I talked a little bit about the sacrifice that this new age of education has on some of the individuals, the proponents of it, some of the social dynamics that may be sacrificed because of where we're moving. Where do you think education is sacrificed in terms of what we used to do? Football players, especially in college. Now with name, image, likeness, money, flowing around college environments a lot. Where does education stand on the priority list for these student athletes who are coming out of high school?
3. It's a different world now.
Different world, brother.
It's a different world.
We're eating Waffle House and Whataburger, man.
Fam. Whataburger, Waffle House, Guthrie's.
Come on. Gut Box.
Gut Box. What was the pizza spot? Hungry Howie's.
Hungry Howie's.
Large pepperoni pizza for what?
Mellow
$4.99?
mushroom.
Mellow
Come on,
mushroom.
man.
Dog. And again, nothing wrong with those establishments. It's still rock
Jenny's
with them.
Lunchbox. Shout out to
Oh,
Jenny's
you already know
Lunchbox,
Jenny's
baby.
Lunchbox. Come on,
Tallahassee,
dog.
baby.
Yes, sir.
Jenny's
Bro, I
Lunchbox?
drop Jenny's Lunchbox at least once a week on every show that I do at ESPN and ACC Network.
You got
Anybody
to.
goes to Tallahassee hitting up Jenny's Lunchbox.
Oh, man, phenomenal.
Man, now in today's era of, because really, look, let's cut to the chase. College athletics is becoming professional.
Yeah.
It always really has been in the sense of our schedule, because I didn't feel any different outside of when I had to go to class in college to where when I went to NFL, my day felt the same as a football player. I was training. I was in the film room. I was in the indoor facility working on my body, doing soft tissue, getting treatment if I had an injury or if I was trying to prevent an injury. Again, going back to that film room, which
Soft tissue was like massages.
yeah,
yoga.
rolling out, exactly, massages, your ankle rotation, arm rotation, doing QB school, shoulder shop, and all those kinds of things to keep my arm
What
fresh.
nerves were you working out? What nerves?
Nerves, I don't know that part. I don't know the nerves.
Okay.
Was it thoracic nerve or something like that? Is that a nerve?
Yeah, you're in there, baby. You're in there,
Okay,
baby.
thoracic's in the back though, right? In the
This is
neck?
back. Thoracic is right here, baby.
Okay, yeah.
Thorax.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
yeah.
cool. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
you
We'll
got
have to talk about that one. But to give a long-winded answer here, college sports has completely gone away from education. Yeah. Now, I think the NCAA still tries to coin this as student athlete, because you still are afforded a full ride to go to school, but you have to play football, basketball, baseball, whatever sport it may be. But now with the ability where players are now going to get paid, that was just passed by, the NCAA had to settle in a case a few weeks ago, to where student athletes will get paid. They'll get a portion. Even some back pay, I think going back to like 2016.
2016.
Yeah, for
We're too
student
old,
athletes. We
man.
missed that. Yeah,
We're
we
too
did
old,
miss
brother.
that window. But more power to them. You know what I mean? I'm glad they're getting that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, it's become professional. And, I've always wondered if you're able to transfer every year, or which is really free agency in college, where you can get to this transfer portal. And for those that don't know what the transfer portal is, it's twice in a year in the calendar for football, basketball. They all have different windows. And as a athlete, you can put your name in the portal, which then opens you up to get recruited again by other schools. Or if you have a conversation with the head coach there, you can decide to come out the portal and stay at your current school. A ton of leverage for a student athlete. You have none of that leverage as a pro athlete in real sports, because when you're a free agent, you're just a free agent.
That's it.
And they can either re-sign you or you go somewhere else. But I think now I'm just wondering, how can you keep your credit hours unison if you've transferred 3 times in your college career in 4 or 5 years?
Yeah.
Education cannot be the most important thing to you. Now, I still think it should be, because you're not going to play football forever. You're not going to play basketball forever. You may not make it to the NBA. You may not make it to the MLB. So then what are you going to lean back on? Now you can go into coaching, which is still along of having the education of being an athlete for so many years. But I still think it's important to have that background to say, hey, you know what, man, I actually want to start my law degree. Or, hey, man, you know what, I actually want to start my doctorate. Hey, you know what, man, I actually want to get into entrepreneurship. I want to get into real estate. And that goes back to having an education. So I think it's important for these young people, high school kids, college kids, to still keep in mind, man, like, yeah, I'm thinking about the bag, and they are getting real money too. Some guys getting millions of dollars.
Yeah. Matter of fact, they even do an NIL here in Florida for high school football as well.
Really?
It's just happened. But let me push back on you real quick.
Okay. Yeah, push back.
Let me push back on you,
Push back.
Eric Manuel Jr.
Okay. Using governments now. Okay. Mine, Laurent.
Full name,
Roll.
baby.
Okay.
Come
I
on,
like
full
that.
name, baby. So people go to college.
Yep.
A lot of people, not all of them, but the majority of people go to college to earn a degree so that they can be in better positions and more highly valued by a potential employer, or to be an employer themselves, where they can earn a substantial living and take care of family and do the things that they want to do. Buy a house, own property, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, the American dream.
American dream,
Yep.
right? That's sort of the pathway. It is,
At least that's what we think.
right.
Correct.
It's evidence-based that you have a degree, maybe even multiple degrees, and maybe degrees from certain institutions.
Sure.
You are higher valued on the market for people who are coming to try to get that same position that you are. So if now in college you are making the same money that you might have made pre-degree, what is the importance of having this degree, having this education, putting yourself through organic chemistry 1, 2, plus labs, plus biochemistry, waking up at 7 o'clock in the morning, doing anatomy and physiology? If the purpose was to make money and now you're making money, where is the emphasis on education?
That's such a great question.
Talk to me, baby. Talk to me.
The reason why it's still important is because, again, you can't rely on athletics your entire life. At some point, that shelf life will end.
Come on.
At some point, your knees will go bad. At some point, somebody's not going to want you. Similarly, on another episode we talked about, is just when we got cut, we didn't think we were supposed to get cut. We were playing well.
Yeah.
But a coach just decides to go in a different direction, and you no longer have that athletic endeavor, that athletic career, whether it stops at college or it stops in high school or it stops wherever in the pros. So I still think if you're going to be a student athlete, because still that's the coin, like that's still the term. At the end of the day, sure, you could be making money, you can be buying your mom's a house, all these kinds of things. That's great, and it's what you should do. But you still got to go to class in order to stay eligible. You still got to be eligible to actually get on the field or on the court or on the baseball diamond, okay? So if you're going to spend that time, at least get something out of it. If you're going to spend 3 or 4 years in college, at least walk away with a degree. Whether you use it or not, it doesn't matter. But I still think it's more so of seeing something through. If your main initiative as a student athlete, or really as a student in college, is to get a degree, like that's the whole purpose you go to school. Of course, you're going to get enriched with experiences and education and backgrounds and different things like that. But the send off is the degree. And so I'm not going to go to school for 3 or 3.5, 4 years and not walk away with a degree. That's just me. Now, also, that probably comes from the framework of my parents, and that being something that was always important to my sister and I from our parents when we were in like 2nd grade. You don't want to come home with bringing C's and D's. You want to get A's and B's, especially if you can do it, because if you put a little bit more time into studying, you can achieve it. So I just think as much as it's cool to get the bag, I just said this, you still got to get your degree as well. I think that's super important. Look, we have teammates, and granted, we're in our 30s, mid-30s now, who still go back to school now. I think I was watching The Pivot, and Fred Taylor said he had went back to University of Florida and got his degree. You know what I mean? So congrats to Fred T. Like that.
Fred T, shout out.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like that stuff. And he said it's not just the importance of playing in the league. He got plenty of money. He don't need, education per se to live his life. He's living a good life. But he knew that it was something that he promised to himself, promised to his family. And again, it's a huge achievement in your life. So that would be my answer to that, man. Like, you can't just look at education or your career, your time in college is just about getting money in the transaction of playing the sport. You still need to get your education. And then if you have the opportunity to afford yourself to play in the NFL, NBA, whatever professional league it is, you parlay that into something else too.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Great answer, by the way, and I agree with you.
Long-winded, but
come on, no, you got it, baby.
Yeah, but I mean, how do you see it? Like, because you went from playing pro football to being a doctor. You know what I mean? Like, everybody transitioned. Are you the only one from the NFL that became maybe not the only doctor, but like
there's other doctors.
Neurosurgeon? It's probably less than 5 of y'all, I would assume.
Maybe even less than that, baby.
Yeah, less than 2 probably. Maybe you might be the only neurosurgeon that played the league. Sure, but seriously,
possible.
It's few of you guys, and that's where it airs. So like, how do you see the situation?
Yeah,
for student athletes now in college.
Yeah, I do. I think that if you have that vision to be
ambition.
A physician or to be a lawyer or to be a professor or whatever the case may be, there are certain aspects of your journey that just have to come with it. Having a degree is one. Getting involved in research is one. Meeting and networking with people who eventually can, be a part of your larger circle to help you achieve that goal is another. And so there's sort of strategic chess moves that you have to make in college that go beyond just the academic intellectual prowess that you're able to accrue. And that's what we talk about. The holistic educational experience comes from people who have in their mind a larger goal for themselves beyond this momentary money that I might be getting through NIL, beyond these riches that I may be getting by getting paid by the NCAA and things like that, my college or so, and beyond the career that you'll have in your professional sport if you make it to a professional sport.
And even if you make it, you don't know how long you'll be in
not
that professional sport either. Exactly,
yeah, man. I
exactly.
mean, look,
to where you don't get vested or you don't get
none of that, bro. Number one high school player in the country, All-American, 3-year started as a freshman at FSU. You couldn't tell me I wasn't playing 8-10 years in the NFL. I had coaches in the Tennessee Titans told me, hey, Myron, I've been coaching longer than you've been alive. You can play 8-9 years in the league. I see it. You have that talent. It didn't work out that way. Yeah. 3 years and I was gone, right? And so, like, it no matter how you think you have it laid out, it could change, it could shift. And to have that imprinting of education and truly value that experience, it's going to matter when you're old and with gray hair and your beard like I am.
Yeah, man.
And all that.
You have a great perspective that actually I want to ask you this question because I think there's probably a lot more athletes than most people give credit that actually do take education very seriously. So I do want to make that clear. There's a ton of athletes that do find education important. They want to get their degree. They have thoughts outside of their sport and their playing field. But do you think that was something that hurt you in your NFL career? And what I mean by that is maybe, because again, we talk about when you and I played, there was still some of that old school, old regime that it was football and nothing else. Yeah. So you walk in the room, just left Oxford, England, come in with a degree from Oxford, you know what I'm saying? Like maybe the perception, which we all know is reality, right? Especially in certain walks of professions, they look at that as like, he's not as locked in on his sport. So maybe some athletes today feel like if I show that I have a real interest in education, maybe it actually hurts me as a recruit, hurts me as, a player coming from college going to a pro level. Yeah. Is that something that you felt like it hurt you?
The answer is yes. The short answer is absolutely yes. Unequivocally, yes.
Wow.
Sí. Por supuesto.
En español.
Por supuesto.
Oui.
Claro que sí. Oui. Yes. I mean, how many? I don't know in the Swahili, but if it was in Swahili, I would say yes in Swahili too. Yeah. No, I, to be frank, brother, being a student athlete and having that part of my journey, the student part, emphasized in college when I was going for the Rhodes Scholarship from Florida State University. Right. Wonderful public school, but not really known as like Harvard or MIT.
Harvard.
Not known as that. So here's a guy who's a true student athlete who is an All-American football player, but he's going for the Rhodes Scholarship. I mean, this is unbelievable. It's like they couldn't fathom it. The president of our university, T.K. Weatherall, said, he was quoted in the New York Times, said, Myron Rolle is holding the academic reputation of our university on his back right now.
Wow.
Because the year before I'd won it, you weren't in school yet.
I remember this. It was like a whole
cheating scandal, right? Against the University of Kentucky. Well,
computer lab against you.
Like that. We had 39 players suspended for our bowl game, the Music City Bowl.
Right.
And so we're coming off of that. We're coming off
you
that.
In that
terrible.
computer lab? Was you in the class?
I was in the computer lab, baby.
Okay.
I was taking organic chemistry, baby. Come on, don't do me like that, baby. Don't do me like that. Don't do me like that.
Making sure, dog. Making sure. Got to earn it. But continue though, because I think this is important too.
Yeah,
a lot of
it
athletes
was-
out there.
It was definitely so they were like pumping me up as being the true model student. And when I won the Rhodes Scholarship, it set everything on fire. I was like, man, this guy is going to go to Oxford. He's going to give up the NFL, and he's going to be, great one day. And look at him just championing this sort of push of academia being more important than sports at this moment. He is the new age Bill Bradley, right? And so they were throwing all these sort of large terms at me and really holding on to that academic side of things. When I got drafted by the Titans in the 6th round, 207 pick, went out hitting Nashville, Tennessee. The coaches, although they appreciated my talent, appreciated my skill, many of the coaches, they would come up to me and say, hey, tell me about that humanitarian trip you took to Congo with President Clinton. I read about you were helping sexually violated women over there in East Africa. Tell me about that. Tell me about the Rhodes Scholarship. Tell me about medical anthropology. I mean, they wanted to learn and know about all that stuff.
They were curious, yeah.
And I was like, man, can I talk to you about cover 2?
Right.
Can I talk to you about man-to-man? Because I want to be just like an athlete and respected just like these other guys.
Wow.
And I actually kind of shied away from talking about some of my extracurriculars or some of my educational experiences because I felt that it was
hurting you.
continue to hurt me. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but a lot of my family members and close members of my family and other friends would say, Myron, when you were coming through, there was the huge concussion movie that came out.
Will Smith, yeah.
There was a lot of conversation around this. Everyone knew that you were going to be a brain surgeon, right? Everyone knew that you were this highly intelligent person. If you end up getting hurt by playing in the NFL and not becoming what we thought you were destined to become, that would be a terrible blow on the image and reputation of the NFL. That one of their best and brightest now is a vegetable or now can't think like he was thinking before. And so let's maybe transition him out of the league to let him do something else. And let's get him to a place where he might be able to might have success in other aspects. That's why when they made that comment to me, you're going to be successful whatever you do, Myron. Don't worry about football. You're good. I'm like,
You don't want to hear that, though.
I don't want to hear that.
Nah,
Like, I still want to play.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it did get me to medical school quicker. It got me there safely with hands able to, be useful, that I have dexterity. I can operate with my hands. No concussions, no long-standing chronic headaches or anything like that would preclude me from operating and saving lives. And it got me to this point where I am today, where I still appreciate football, but I still value my education because I was able to do sort of both and have fun, and now looked at as sort of a role model for young people who are thinking about their school as importantly as I think about
you
their
absolutely
sport.
are that. I mean,
Thank
and
you,
we've
brother.
talked about this too, like when the concussion thing went down in the NFL, who were they calling? Dr. Myron Rowe.
Come on now.
You know what I mean? So I do think it's unfortunate in a way because you certainly could have had a long career in the NFL, but it just so happened that with the circumstances and those making decisions around you, it's really interesting to do. And that's why I asked that question, because perception is so important in life, man. Like, you can be the smartest and brightest and still want to play a sport. But like, I know for a fact coaches look at other guys, the smart guys, as not full-on football players, which I don't think is right.
Right.
And I'm sure this happens in every sport. But I just think that that's something that needs to change in coaching. It's like, just because a young person has, ambition beyond just playing cover 2 or cover 3, though that is important. When you need to have it, you got to have it, right? But I don't think that should be something that's used against a player. For example, I can imagine a coach yelling at somebody, that's because you was in your books, that's because you was studying, da-da-da. Like, coach, I mean, I'm a student athlete too. I got to get my degree as well, coach. You know what I mean? Like,
I remember Mickey Andrews.
I was thinking about Mickey. I ain't going to say his name, but I was thinking about Coach Andrews. I probably heard it.
Baby. I love you, coach. You are the man.
Coach.
The
Yes,
reason
sir.
why I wrote my book, The 2% Way, is because of you,
Because
coach.
of him. Yeah.
I remember Coach Andrews, one time I missed the gap, and he was so upset. He says, God damn it, Roll, if that was an organic chemistry test, you would have hit that son of a... I'm like, coach, man. He wasn't using that language for the other players, right? Because they were worried about organic chemistry like I was. But he was like, hey, I'm going to do something to get under your skin to motivate you in a way. And then after practice, he came and hugged me and said, I love you, right? I said, coach, you just yelled at me, spit on me, and told me I wasn't a good student or a good athlete. So what's up, man?
That's good,
he's
though,
a great
man.
though.
Absolutely. Shout out to Coach Andrews. Well, look, I'll wrap it up, man. My fresh takeaway from this show, I think the biggest thing is being open in your education. And whether you're a parent to your child or whether you're the young child yourself, I think one should be open and take opportunity to travel and get experiences and learn different cultures, meet different people too from different walks of life. I think that's super important. But ultimately, man, you got to have something to fall back on. I know that sounds cliche because you always hear people say that, especially for athletes. But I really think it's important to still have that basis of education, because even if you want to play in WNBA as a woman, if you want to play in the major league as a baseball, you still have to be able to retain information. You still have to be smart. So any person that thinks I'm about to go to the league, whatever league that is, and I don't have to worry about any studying or any books, that is wrong. Like that's like day one install that you get into NFL. You got to learn and be able to retain that information, take what you get in the classroom out there to the football field and execute. So that's part of the job.
No, that's awesome, brother. That's really strong. I think my fresh takeaway is, understanding that young people, their journey can be buttressed and supported by multiple streams of imprinted educational experiences on their life. And you can access the creativity and the mind and the depth and breadth of the beautiful mind of young people by exposing them to things just outside of the school. It doesn't have to stop in the school. It can start at home, in the community center, in church, on the playing field, as you said, traveling. We can have these experiences that shape the lives of these young people in a way that make them the true leaders we want them to be. My wife and I work with the West Lakes Early Learning Center in Orlando, Florida, and we built home libraries and gave about 2 or 3 books to young, underserved Black and brown individuals in inner city Orlando. And it wasn't about school. Wow. It was about giving them books and giving them moments and opportunities to say, this is who you are, this is who you can be. I don't need school to tell you that you can be this. Here I am trying to be a community leader like my wife as well. And we can be the person and the persons that step in to say, we want to add to your educational journey, and here's how we're going to do it. So I think there's a lot of people that can impact these young folks in different ways to give them that structure, to give them that education, that imprints holistically on their body, to see them through, to see them be successful. That's my fresh takeaway. Don't let it stop in the classroom. Let it go out into the community and out into the world, and you'll see the benefits in the future.
Good stuff, Three. Good stuff. All right, y'all. Well, again, that wraps up another episode of us here on the Freshman Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for lending your ear. Stay locked in. Y'all be good.